A card component is an essential piece in a design system. They usually take you to a specific page, contain brief content and actions. In this tutorial, I'll go over the steps that I take in order to create a perfectly responsive card design with auto layout on Figma. You'll learn how to structure the content and its elements, auto layout nesting, making it responsive and touching up the UI, testing for various screen sizes, and finally, we'll make sure that it passes font scaling with regards to accessibility. Let's go. So the card design that I want to create in this tutorial will have an image at the top with content at the bottom with a CTA button as well. First thing we want to do is take our image, make a copy of it. And since we're designing for mobile, I want to make sure that it has a good size. In this case, I want to set this to, let's see, 375 pixels. We're getting these odd numbers. So let's make sure that we crop up the image. Let's set that to 200 pixels. 375, 200. Let's make sure that we fill it. Check off the constraint proportion and then set that to 200 pixels, and now we're good. So we have 375 pixels in width and 200 pixels in height. Let's go with an 8-point grid and 8-point for all of the base sizes of the card elements. So let's create text, the different kind of text styles that we want to have. I'm imagining this one to have an overline at the top. Then we want to have a title for the card, and then some body text. Let's make this a couple of rows, perhaps 3. And also we want to create a button. I like the Proxima Nova font, so let's stick to that, and let's start defining all of the different textiles. So for the overline, which is placed at the top, usually showing a category of some kind, let's set that to 14 pixels to make sure that it's legible. But since 14 pixel is still a little bit under the base size that is recommended in human interface guidelines and material design, we want to make sure to amp the legibility up just a little bit, and we do this by setting all uppercase letters. And make sure to add a little bit of character spacing. I think that looks pretty decent, so let's stick to that. And then for the title of the card, I want to make sure that that's big enough. Since that's the title, sticking with the 8 pixel base size, let's go with 20 pixels. So usually I just take 8 pixels or a half of it, which is 4. So in this case, instead of moving from 8 pixels to 16 and 24, I take half of 8, so we got 16 plus 4, 20. Let's stick to that. Body text, we can have that as 16. So if we were to create styles out of these, the overline would have 14 pixel as a base size, the title would have 20 pixel as a base size, and then the body text has 16 pixels as a base size. The button, let's stick to 16 pixels here as well. And let's turn this into a button. Shift A, turn that into an auto layout frame. Let's rename that to button. Let's add in a color. Let's take this one. Turn that into white. Medium is good. Let's have 12 pixel at the top, 12 at the bottom. Yeah, that's fine for now. 16. Let's make it slightly rounded, 4 pixels. That's good enough for a button. Let's actually turn this into a component so that it's easier for us to grab this later down the line. And let's finalize these. So for the top one, I think having a medium font weight is good. For the title, bold. Let's try that. I like to have contrasts between all of my font weights. The more contrast you have, the better it actually comes off looking. So in this case, let's stick to regular. That's fine. So the structure is pretty much done. We just want to make sure that we turn these into different auto layout elements. So I see this card having two different segments: the top structure, which is just the image alone, and then the bottom structure contains the content and the CTA button. So let's add these two in one auto layout frame. I'll call this one titles. Let's set that to 4 pixel distance. I think that's fine enough. The body, I want to have that with I think an 8 pixel distance is fine. I usually go with the lower spacing increments for content that are related to one another. So in this case, I think 8 pixel is fine, and then 4 pixel between the top and the main title is good. So let's put this into a separate auto layout, and I'll show you guys why we have this in a separate auto layout in just a bit. I'll name this one as left, 0 padding for this one, and then the top one has 0 as well. So let's stick to that. Turn that into an auto layout frame as well. So we're basically just nesting everything. So we have the left one, the title at the top, and there is a 12 pixel now. Let's go with 8. I think that's fine. So the button, we will add in the button to be a right container next to the left container here, which is just the text. So we'll add this button in. Let's place it right next to this one, and we'll call this content plus action. It has a button, it has the left content, which is just the text itself. Just for structure, I would usually just place this in an auto layout as well. Call it right, because then in that case you have everything properly structured, and if you were to ever replace the button with any other type of content, then you can easily do that inside of this container. So I see these as containers. That's usually how things are structured in web development as well, or mobile development. So let's make sure that these go in a horizontal direction, and let's make this one fill the container 0 pixels, and make sure that content plus action has a 24 pixel distance. So for the top, let's make sure that it fills the container as well. And now for this whole frame, we want to make that responsive. So for the button, this is fine. We want it to hug the content. This is good. For the left side, we want this to fill the container, and we want it to hug the content. So this basically means we only have these ones left. We want this to fill the container and hug the content. For the overline, we want to do the same thing. Fill container in width. And we want to make sure this is marked as fill container. So now basically everything should be responsive. good. All right, so let's put these two together into one bigger frame. I would select all of them, Shift A, make this into a big component, call this card. So inside of this element, we have the cover image at the top. We have the bottom, which contains the content plus action, and then the title at the top. So let's make sure that we add some padding. I'll stick to 16 pixels all across the full frame. So we have 16 pixels at the top, bottom, right, and left. Let's add a fill for the background. Make it white. In this case, I think this is fine. Let's test this out. It's not perfectly responsive yet. We'll make sure to do that in the next step. So the reason for this not being responsive yet is because of the fact that the elements inside are still either in a fixed width state or they're just hugging the content. In this case, we can see that the width of the image is set to fixed width and it has a fixed height. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to make sure that it fills the container, but it still has the same height. For the bottom section, we want to make this fill the container. So we have the content plus action that's automatically filling the container. We want to make sure that all of the different elements inside has the right resizing states. Left fills the container, right, we just want to make sure that it hugs the content because it needs to be responsive, the button. So depending on the content that we place inside of the button, we want to make sure that it responds to that. The title at the top fills the container, the individual texts inside of it fills the container. So everything seems to be good. In this case, I think this is responsive enough. Perfect. This works exactly as I hoped it would. Let's try another CTA. Cool. Yeah, this is perfectly responsive. So let's just touch up the UI a little bit. I want to add rounded corners and then perhaps just a slight stroke outside of the card, just to give it a little bit of edge when we place it inside of a frame. So rounded corners, let's set that to, let's try 8 pixels. All right, that's fine. The reason we're not seeing the rounded corners at the top is because we're not clipping the content. This image layer is placed inside of this frame, and since we are actually cropping the top edges with this corner radius, we want to make sure that we clip the content. Otherwise, any of the layers that are inside are still going to be shown unless we check the clip content marker. So this is fine enough. Add a stroke, make that slightly gray. The next thing we want to do is create a frame. Let's run with the 13 Pro Max. Let's call this just 13 Pro Max. We're gonna copy one of these cards inside. Make sure that it's fully edge to edge. So since these are 428 in width, we're gonna stick to that. And if you hold in Shift and Option and you select the other constraint, you're gonna see that both left and right gets marked. This basically means that if you take this frame and you resize it, then by default the content inside is going to resize as well. In this case, I want to make a copy of this, turn this into a 13 Pro, and then let's do the X. And then lastly, let's go with the small one, the SC. These cards weren't really designed to be edge to edge due to the fact that we added the strokes and the radius and everything. So I want to make sure that these have 16 pixels margins on the left and the right side. So let's select all of these. And even though they have different width sizes, you can still add -32 to each one of them. And if you center them, then by default, you get 16 pixels on each side. Perfect. So now they're still perfectly responsive, and it actually looks good in each and every device size that we have seen across the board. This one is called SE. Both on iOS and Android devices, there's a setting in the phone that allows you to enable different accessibility features. In this case, we'll account for one of those called font scaling. The sizes that we have set so far is the base size, right? So if you add font scaling, that means you add an increased percentage with the base size as the base, the foundation. In both human interface guidelines and material design, you can see that there's a base size that has been set that they recommend. So in this case, let's try 16 times 1.5, which is in percentage, 50% more. 16 times 1.5, 20 times 1.5, and then the overline times 1.5. So it actually works pretty well. I would probably say that you would have to perhaps set some kind of a cap for the number of characters that you want to have inside of the button. But other than that, I think this actually works pretty well. Just as a final touch up, I would just make sure that the bottom piece here has the alignment set to bottom, because it actually looks better. So let's make sure that we add this as part of the main component. Now we can take this piece and turn this into a component. Perfectly responsive, and yeah, that's about it. So just in a few minutes, you were able to create a card component design, structured it well, made it responsive, and you made sure that it passed a few tests. I hope you enjoyed and found value in this video. Make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and hit that like button below for more content like this. I would love to know what you guys took away from this tutorial. Please share any comments or requests in the comments below. See you guys in the next one. Peace.